Hello, welcome to the DFSS Planning Cycle Training. This training is intended for the Citywide Parent Policy Council of the Chicago Department of Family and Sports Services Head Start grants. This is the second part of a three-part training. You can watch all of the trainings or just the ones you are interested in. The planning cycle training has three parts. First, overview and community needs assessment. Second, self-assessment. And three, monitoring and program goals. This training is about the self-assessment. What is required in a self-assessment? This slide contains the Head Start program performance standard that outlines the requirement for an annual self-assessment by programs. As you can read, a Head Start funded program must conduct a self-assessment that uses at least three kinds of data: program data, professional development data, and parent and family engagement data. The self-assessment is used to evaluate the program's progress towards meeting goals. It's used to assess compliance with program standards, and it's used to assess the effectiveness of professional development and family engagement systems. In conducting the self-assessment, an agency must collaborate with its staff, its board of directors, its policy council or policy committee, and with the parents of children who are enrolled in the program. The findings of the self-assessment, including the information listed above in Roman numeral I, needs to be submitted to the Office of Head Start. So our delegate agencies, Chicago Early Learning delegate agencies, submitted to DFSS, and we submit it in its entirety to the Office of Head Start. Why do we need a self-assessment? Like the community assessment, the self-assessment plays an important role in program planning for Head Start and also for other Chicago early learning programs like Preschool for All and Prevention Initiative. It helps programs determine what program parts need improvements. It helps programs determine which improvements to prioritize. It helps a program figure out if its program goals are in alignment with its program needs or if those need to be revised. It helps programs evaluate progress on their goals, and it helps a program self-correct. Who conducts a self-assessment? Every Head Start funded agency and every PFI/PI funded agency must complete an annual self-assessment and submit it to DFSS. The results from the agency level self-assessments are aggregated up and used in DFSS's grantee-wide, program-wide self-assessment. Because each Head Start grantee, which is what DFSS is, must conduct an annual self-assessment as well. We conduct this comprehensive self-assessment, which focuses on how we're managing the program. How is the self-assessment conducted? There are 5 stages outlined here, but if you can look at either end of the arrow, there's also a pre and post stage, which are equally important. Pre. In the pre-stage, or prior to conducting the self-assessment, the management team at the agency sets a framework for conducting the self-assessment. The agency needs to appoint someone to facilitate and organize the self-assessment as their job duty. And in the case of DFSS, that is the Program Administration Unit's Planning and Communications team. The agency also determines how the self-assessment team will be constructed to ensure that staff, board, PC, and parents participate. At DFSS, we currently have a self-assessment committee that includes delegate agency representatives from each of our program models, DFSS staff from both Children's Services Division that administers the grant and from other divisions who work on the grants, such as contracts, finance, grants, citywide parent policy committee parents, council parents, and CCUO board members. DFSS focuses on a citywide, system-level program operations. We try to make sure that scope is broad. So phase one is engaging the team. As I said, we have representatives on the DFSS self-assessment committee from different stakeholders. And typically they sit for 2 or 3 years on the committee so that there's some legacy going on. When we engage the team, we provide training about the expectations for the self-assessment and the process. And we try to stay open-minded, strength-based, and value others' opinions. Phase two, we design a process. We develop a plan for the self-assessment. This plan may include a self-assessment tool that can be used to guide the program through the process. Different tools are available for programs to use if they want. We've used different tools in the past. These might include the federal monitoring tool. They might include surveys of agencies and parents and staff, which is what we're doing this year. It may include environmental rating scales on a program level. Some programs use their NACE accreditation checklist tool. And some TNTA providers, Head Start TNTA providers, have tools that programs can use. Part of that plan is developing a schedule, assigning roles and responsibilities, doing some preliminary looking at data to prioritize areas for investigation. So our process is usually determined at the end of the previous self-assessment cycle. At that point, usually in the fall, the current self-assessment committee debriefs about the process and makes some recommendations about how we should handle the self-assessment in the coming cycle. So our next step is to actually conduct the self-assessment, which includes analyzing data and dialoguing about it. Different agencies, like I said, do this differently. So your home agency will have a plan about how they are going to conduct a self-assessment. We have a plan as well, and that's something that'll be distributed to you if you haven't seen it already, so you can look at it. Typically, we have the self-assessment committee meet 4 to 6 weeks in a row to dive deeply into the data and discuss the program's strengths and challenges. We try to do this in the spring, but this year we needed to postpone it. And so we are going to be conducting it from midsummer, about June 25th to July 22nd. An important part of these weekly meetings is analyzing the data. These are some of the sorts of questions that we ask about the data and we use to prompt conversation. So for example, we might have some child outcomes data. It'll be program-wide, and we might start asking questions about it. Typically, the planning and communications staff will do some preliminary work with data indicators. For example, they'll track a particular indicator over time. We might say, okay, in April of 2020, how many children had medical homes? And then we might look at April of 2019 to see if we're doing better, doing the same, doing not quite as well. Data also might be disaggregated by agency. That's like the PIR report we receive monthly that has indicators, and then along the left column, each delegate agency is listed so you can see what percentage of children have completed certain data indicators. In addition, this year we'll have survey data to look at and see how agencies responded to surveys that the self-assessment committee helped put together. So for this year, for the data, here's a list of some of the data that we'll be looking at. Survey data from agencies, parents, and staff, enrollment data, attendance data. Again, this is program-wide. Goal data, it could be our program goal data, it could be strategic framework data. Federal monitoring data over the course of the year. As you all know, we've had some corrective action plans and some quality improvement plans that we've been working on, so we'll want to collect some data about those improvement plans and see how the department is doing. PIR data, as much as available, so up till April. Services during COVID-19, this is something that we'll especially want to look at this year to make sure that agencies, what kind of communication have they regularly had with the children enrolled in their programs. And then we'll look at some data from DFSS, some of our unit data about our day-to-day operations. So such as how many monitoring visits were conducted prior to agencies closing. How many corrective action plans were there? How many roundtables? For the quality team, we might want to know about the number of trainings that were delivered. What kind of attendance by agencies were done? For example, if there's a certain agency that never attended any training, that might be an issue. From the administration unit, we might look at the number of contracts that were executed, what the average time was on that. We'll look at our CPPC events and attendance. We'll look at our CSD update newsletter to see how many agencies are opening that regularly. And we might look at other deliverables that we had planned on for the year and see how we do on them. So this set of data, too, this is what we start with. It can change over the course of those 5 meetings as we start to discuss what's going on. It might change as we see that we might want to look at some other sorts of data. So then phase 4 is to make recommendations. So after these about 4 weeks of discussing the data, discussing what's going on in our programs, discussing our impression of what's going on in the programs, we'll start to consolidate discoveries, right? We're going to stay focused on systems, the Head Start management wheel systems that govern Head Start programs and determine how operations take place. So then the committee will make some recommendations about what areas they want us to focus on, especially in the final report. What do we want to pull out as strengths? What do we want to pull out as areas that need improvement? And as part of that too, we do a draft of the self-assessment report, we bring it back to the committee, and then the committee will make recommendations for an action plan. That action plan will then go to CSD leadership for review and some final determinations before it comes back to both the CCUO and the CPPC, or the governing body and the Parent Advisory Council, to make final decisions. So phase 5, so we've made recommendations. Phase 5 is to prepare the report and complete, we aren't completing the summary tool. We're preparing the report. The self-assessment report is the same for every agency. And I'm going to get to the action plan in a minute. This is what the template looks like. This is from the eClick from Head Start. Every agency submits a report using this template. And we then submit it to the feds. So here are some important due dates to kind of talk a little bit about the scheduling flow. Delegate agencies typically submit their self-assessments in the spring. So they're submitting both their self-assessment report and the survey. That's that summary tool that we have agencies fill out, so we can use it for ours. We have them do it in the spring for several reasons. First off, that allows them to use it for their grant applications that need to be submitted usually in the summer, and also for their program planning that takes place over the summer. When the agencies create their self-assessment report, they also draft a preliminary improvement plan or action plan that they submit to their monitoring team in the spring. Then the operations monitoring team can review that prior to roundtables. If you remember from the first training, the roundtable is when the agency comes in and the DFSS monitoring team comes in, they sit at a table, they compare how they both think the program is doing and what they think needs to be improved, what are the strengths and what are those areas for improvement. The other reason we do it in the spring is though that gives the planning and communications team sufficient time to start to aggregate those results so we can give them to the self-assessment committee to review in aggregate for the DFSS system-wide self-assessment. So like I said, we're conducting ours this year in July. It kind of lasts till July 22nd is what we have planned right now. And so we should have a draft report ready in the very beginning of August that will be released to all the different stakeholders. And usually in the August meeting, it gets presented to the CPPC for review and approval. Then it gets submitted with the annual Head Start grant application on September 1. And here I have a list of the responsibilities of the DFSS Self-Assessment Committee. So we complete the self-assessment at the end of the summer. So then really we're set to make improvements into the fall. And then the self-assessment committee continues to meet quarterly throughout the year so we can talk about progress on our action plan. And so they can make recommendations about how we're going to conduct the self-assessment in the next spring for the agencies and summer for DFSS. So it's really like an ongoing cyclical process. If you have any questions about the self-assessment, please don't hesitate to ask us. This is the self-assessment team from the Planning and Communications team and the Program Administration Unit. You can contact me at elizabeth.stover@cityofchicago.org, or you can contact my colleagues Tasha or Bernice, and we will be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Have a great day.